helpful. And I now recognize Mr. Weber for 5 minutes.
Actually, I'm going to yield to Mr. Norman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Congressman Weber. I appreciate you yielding. Mr. Mills, this will be directed to you. I'm from the private sector. We look at results, not intentions. We look at results. And let me just read some of the numbers. As of February 2018, the program has invested approximately $1.8 billion in R&D, which funded over 660 projects through more than 44 programs. And in your testimony, you mentioned the need for audits. Do you think these audits would be useful in highlighting duplicative programs, overlapping, so that we can track where the dollars are yielding results?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm deeply conflicted in this area because I've written about, in an early life, I was a research scientist. I'm extremely enthusiastic about the prospect for government giving more money to scientists. At the same time, I work in the private sector, and I'm very sensitive to results outcomes. My proposal for an audit is really focused on two things, not just looking for duplication, which there's some merit in duplication. I mean, we do this in the private sector, as you know. You might have two teams trying to solve a problem orthogonally, but there can be too much duplication. What I would like ARPA-E to focus on is avoiding doing work that doesn't adhere to its mission. There are missions for basic development, but the underlying transformational science mission, I think there's a potential, looking at some of the programs, that there's a drift towards doing things that are, in fact, the missions of other agencies in the Department of Energy. They're really not transformational. So the other part I would like to add just briefly is that the holding ARPA-E to a utility function that can be specifically measured like dollars and patents is a natural tendency, but I think it's a mistake. I think it's useful, but it will not measure transformations. And I think it's not trivial. There's no easy measurement. I think the witnesses have pointed this out. And I think if you were in a confirmation hearing, you would be forced to say, what's my measure? I understand that. I think there would be merit to forming a committee as part of ARPA-E's future look to come up with an additional creative answer to that question. What else could we use that would help us understand that what ARPA-E's funding has the potential to be transformational, not simply evolutionary to making a PV cell better? That's important, but that would be a private sector mission in my view.
Do you think it would be beneficial to put it under the Department of Energy?
The ARPA-E or the?
Correct.
Sorry. Well, I think it's got a good home. I think the challenge is a version of being insulated from the near-term. If you report to the Secretary, it's better status. I understand that. But the Secretary is driven by the budget near-term mission. One would hope that you create an entity that has some of the insulation that an SEC might have. Some of the agencies that can operate on 5-year cycles where the chairman or the head of it isn't turfed out for failing on a budget metric, but rather they have a different mission. The SEC doesn't have a budget mission, for example. It has a broader social and regulatory mission. In my view, ARPA-E is more in that category than it is a traditional research category.
Dr. Griffin, did you want to say something?
Absolutely. Your concern, I believe, was that ARPA-E's funding may be duplicative of other agencies.
Well, I don't know that. I'm saying why not put a measure in place that could see for the benefit of the program to see if...
I might respectfully suggest that it's not terribly relevant. We applied for, I have now created and commercialized technologies that would not have existed without ARPA-E. We tried to have those things funded through the other agencies of the Department of Energy, and they were non-receptive because, in general, those agencies are more prescriptive about what they're looking for. So ARPA-E's beauty is that it has very wide purview on what is transformational, and so it can pick and choose, and I think it is doing a very good job. So I think it almost by necessity needs to be duplicative in the sense that there's solar here and there's solar there, because the transformative is in the details, and in how ARPA-E has a wider mandate to fund a broader array of entities. For example, ARPA-E can fund a small startup company like mine that doesn't look like a national lab, doesn't look like MIT or Stanford, And don't believe that they're the only places that ideas in this country come from. In fact, in Nature, they just showed that small teams operating independently are the biggest force for transformational R&D in the world. That looks like small companies like mine that quite frankly aren't allowed to access a lot of the other funding within the DOE. So ARPA-E is really the only option.
Thank you for your testimony.